I'm sure you, like me, have met people you go, I'm a big fan of that person. I like what they do. I like their passion. I like their stick-to-itiveness, their continuity, their belief. That person is impressive. You know who that is? It's Ryan Dowd.
That's right.
Ryan Dowd from homelesstraining.com, listen about that as well, joins us now. There's a significant case in the Supreme Court, which seems nonsensical on the surface, but the ramifications are big, and Ryan's here to talk about it. Good morning.
Good morning.
Where are you today?
I'm in Nashville.
Okay, traveling as usual?
Actually, we live down here now.
I thought you were in D.C.
No, that was like a decade ago.
Wow. Catch up, Steve. Holy cow. Are you enjoying Nashville?
We love it down here.
Yeah, it's a good time.
The weather's so much better than up there.
All right, shut up. All right, so explain to me the Supreme Court case as you understand it.
Yeah, the legal issue is a little more nuanced than this, but it basically comes down to, can a city criminalize sleeping outside? And there was a case back in 2018 where the Ninth Circuit said, no, if you don't have enough shelter beds, you can't criminalize, sleeping out on the street. And that kind of left and then the Supreme Court refused to hear that case. And so it kind of left the country in a little bit of a, what's the law, what's not the law. And so there's a new case that came up out of Oregon where the details are a little bit more nuanced than that. But basically, the Supreme Court's like, okay, we got to deal with this. Homelessness is becoming such a big issue, and cities don't know what they can and cannot do. So it's time for us to decide kind of once and for all what can cities do with people sleeping on the street when it comes to finding them and or ultimately, sending them to jail for it.
What is the genesis of this? The idea that we need to clean up the aesthetics of our street, or concern about people? And the fact that they're not using all the available beds. What are they saying?
There's arguments all over the place. In fact, I think it was the city administrator was heard saying, when they were debating this ordinance, we need to make it really uncomfortable so that people go to another town, which is part of the fear here is that, like, okay, if every community in the country criminalizes sleeping on the street and being homeless, and we have inadequate shelter beds in our country, which we know is true, then are we just going to just send everybody to jail because they don't have a place to live? And unfortunately, that's probably the direction we're going to go, because it seems very unlikely at this point that the Supreme Court is going to side with the homeless folks.
Well, it's interesting, too. You talked about that Oregon case. They wanted to fine them almost $300 if you're asleep. If you're homeless and you're involuntarily homeless, you're sleeping outside because you have nowhere to go, you can't afford a fine of $295.
Well, it's worse than that. So if you don't pay it, it goes up to $537. And if you get two of those, you're banned for city property. And if you violate that, you spend 30 days in jail.
It's just a downward spiral.
Yeah, the lack of humanity is stunning. All of us, and I believe you may have taught me this, but all of us are only a couple of paychecks, a couple of missed paychecks, a couple of missed mortgage payments. That's more true. Directly.
That's right.
Away from being in the same position. And years ago, at Hesed House in suburban Aurora, which does such a great job, you toured me there, and I learned so many of the myths that I had in my head about homelessness were completely wrong. Because you had families who had hit a spot where they currently didn't have a home, who were getting up in the morning from the shelter and going to work and sending their kids to school until they were able to right their ship. And you had people of all different kinds of abilities and lack of abilities. But these weren't all addicted people who were babbling to themselves and hearing the voices in their head on the streets. Just not the truth of it.
Well, but the myth at the kind of center of this court case is the myth that people choose to be homeless.
Right.
Which is absolutely absurd. First off, just on its face, I don't know why the heck anybody would choose to live on the street, particularly in an area like Chicago or somewhere that gets really cold. But if you look at who's homeless for a year or longer, so the what's called chronically homeless, the stats are pretty remarkable. So about 18% struggle with schizophrenia, 19% with bipolar disorder, 53% with traumatic brain injury, about 50% with PTSD. I think it's somewhere about 90% of personality disorder. So we're not talking about a population that in any way, shape, or form is choosing this. There are profound issues. If you've been homeless for a year or longer, there tends to be some sort of cognitive impairment there.
Sure.
That's not a choice. And so to tell someone, hey, you're not in a shelter, you're on the street because you might hear voices or whatnot, or have PTSD, and so we're going to criminalize that to try to force you into quote unquote good choices is just scientifically absurd.
So you've worked for a long time on the library piece of this, where should homeless folks be allowed to come into libraries to stay warm and to just get off the street for a period of time? And in general, in public, de-escalating any sort of tension between homeless folks and retailers or shops or businesses or whatever the case may be. Is that what homeless training is doing?
Yeah, so we train organizations on how to compassionately manage the problematic behavior that can come from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and traumatic brain injury and whatnot.
So a business contacts you and says, run us through this. What is the end game? Is it communities failing to have enough shelters and to pay for them?
No, it's communities failing to have enough affordable housing. The research on this is crystal clear that homelessness is almost 100% a consequence of a lack of affordable housing. And that when you build affordable housing, homelessness goes down. When rents go up, homelessness goes up. It's literally that simple.
So it's another failure by politicians ignoring the root cause of something.
Yes.
Well, it's just outrageous.
But shouldn't the Supreme Court then say, okay, whatever funding or whatever we decide, but we should have more funding on affordable housing. We should put more efforts into that.
So this is where the public can act, because you know me, Ryan, I always want people to at least, every other talk show in America does this. Well, let's piss you off and let's get off the air. I want people to actually have a plan of action, something they could do today to make the world a different place. You get a hold of your elected reps, or you decide who you're going to vote for based on their commitment to fixing a problem, not just talking about a problem. That's how we change things. Is there any politicians you could highlight that get this on a bigger level?
Believe it or not, the Bush administration actually did a phenomenal job.
No, he did. No, I believe that completely.
Yeah, and then it's the Bush administration was the high watermark of dealing with homelessness, and it's been steadily going, at least flatline since then.
All right. So if you see, by way of any part of your research and your working today or anything else, where if you see politicians we ought to be hyping, we can get on to talk about doing the right thing, let us know, because the people doing the wrong thing are easy to find.
Yeah. I wish I could think of examples off the top of my head, but it's not that simple, unfortunately.
Well, listen, if I can't put you on the spot, you're not a friend.
It's fair enough.
Homelesstraining.com. I'd recommend that you contact Ryan's company about this type of training because it's important. In the meantime, I wish you were more optimistic about this Supreme Court case. My fear is that you're correct, and then it's going to get swept up in the news cycle, and we'll lose the story. So let's all, with any sense of humanity, get behind this effort to beat some sense into the politicians that make the decisions that could affect this.
Yeah. Especially with the sad thing is, again, at this point, the research is clear. Like we know what causes homelessness. We know how to end homelessness. The research is unequivocal. Yeah. It's just not being accepted by the powers that be.
Ryan Dowd, thank you. We'll be talking again. Hey, and enjoy Tennessee. I hear you new there. See you later.
Will do.
Steve.
Hadn't talked in a decade there, huh,
Yeah.
Steve? Jeez.
Right after all the...
I bet we probably talk every 6 months, and I had no idea he was
That's
living
your
in
friend
Nashville.
and stick-to-itiveness. All of that's the same. You just don't know where he lives.
Not sure where I live.